I always knew I was different from the rest of my family. The outsider. The responsible one. The one who wasn't allowed to dream but was expected to provide. But I never thought I'd become the family ATM, especially not for my brother's fairy tale wedding. A wedding planned using money that was rightfully mine, without so much as asking me first. My name is Sophie Bennett, and this is the story of how I discovered my worth wasn't measured by what I could give, but by what I refused to surrender. It started with a text. A simple notification that pinged while I was in the middle of a business meeting. Check your bank account. Now. It was from Maya, my best friend since college, and the only person who had access to my financial information besides me. I excused myself from the table, stepped into the hallway, and opened my banking app. The blood drained from my face as I stared at the screen. A withdrawal of $220,000, almost the entirety of my inheritance from my grandmother, had been processed that morning. I called the bank immediately, certain it was fraud. The customer service representative's voice was calm, professional. The transaction was authorized, Miss Bennett. The funds were transferred according to the power of attorney document we have on file. My heart stopped. What power of attorney? It was submitted last week. It bears your signature, authorizing your father, Richard Bennett, to make financial decisions on your behalf. I never signed such a document. Never. The meeting forgotten, I drove straight to my parents' house in the suburbs of Boston, my knuckles white against the steering wheel. The familiar colonial with its perfect lawn and trimmed hedges looked exactly as it always had, deceptively normal, deceptively safe. My mother, Elaine, opened the door before I could knock, her smile practiced but her eyes darting nervously. Sophie, what a surprise! We weren't expecting you until the rehearsal dinner tomorrow. I pushed past her into the foyer, my voice tight. Where's Dad? She flinched at my tone. In his study with Jeremy. They're going over some wedding details. Maybe now isn't the best. But I was already moving, my heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floors as I made my way to the back of the house. I flung open the study door without knocking. My father and brother looked up from a spread of papers on the mahogany desk, both wearing identical expressions of annoyance at the interruption. Sophie, my father said, his voice carrying that familiar note of disappointment. We're in the middle of something important. Something important like stealing $200,000 from me? I demanded. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Then Jeremy laughed, an incredulous sound that scraped against my nerves. Don't be so dramatic, Soph. It's not stealing when it's family. I stared at him. This person I'd grown up with, shared a bathroom with, defended against bullies in elementary school. He was dressed in a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, his hair expertly styled, his expression one of mild irritation as if I were a fly that had landed on his wedding cake. You took my inheritance, I said, my voice dangerously calm. The money Grandma Eleanor left specifically to me. How is that not stealing? My father stood, buttoning his blazer in that authoritative way he had, a gesture meant to remind everyone in the room that he was Richard Bennett, respected attorney, pillar of the community. Your grandmother's money was meant to benefit the family, he said, and right now the family needs it for Jeremy's wedding. The Astleys are extremely important people, Sophie. This connection with their daughter will open doors for all of us. All of us? I echoed. Or just for Jeremy? My brother rolled his eyes. Come on, Sophie. It's not like you were doing anything with the money anyway. You're still living in that depressing apartment, driving that old car. Because I've been saving for my dream, I cut in. For my own business. Jeremy waved a dismissive hand. Your little organization thing? Please. That's a hobby, not a business. Dad and I are making real moves here. My mother appeared in the doorway, wringing her hands. Sophie, dear, try to understand. The Astleys expect a certain standard. The venue alone cost. I don't care what it cost, I snapped. That was my money. Mine. Grandma left it to me because she believed in me. Because she knew none of you ever would. Don't be so self-pitying, my father said coldly. The fact is, you signed the power of attorney. I pulled out my phone, fingers trembling slightly. I never signed anything. My father and Jeremy exchanged a glance. Show me this document, I demanded. Now. After a moment of tense silence, my father opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. Inside was a legal document with what appeared to be my signature at the bottom. But it wasn't my signature. It was close enough to fool a bank teller who didn't know me, but the loops were wrong, the pressure points inconsistent. "This is forged," I said quietly. My brother had the audacity to laugh. "Come on, Soph, don't be a spoilsport. It's my wedding, the biggest day of my life." "You committed fraud," I said, looking directly at my father. "You, a lawyer, forged my signature to steal my inheritance." Something shifted in my father's expression then, a flicker of unease. But Jeremy stepped forward, his handsome face twisting into something ugly. "Look, we didn't want to involve you because we knew you'd make it difficult. You always do. Always so rigid, so self-righteous." He gestured around us, at the study with its leather-bound books and expensive art. "All of this our name, our reputation, you benefit from it too. It's time you contributed." "Contributed?" I repeated, incredulous. "I worked 3 jobs to put myself through business school because you," I pointed at my father, "said there was only enough money for one college fund, and that had to go to Jeremy. I've been paying my own way since I was 17. "And you're so much stronger for it?" my mother interjected, as if this were a compliment. I looked at each of them in turn. My father with his perfect posture and calculated expression, my mother with her nervous smile and pleading eyes, my brother with his entitlement and complete lack of remorse. "I want my money back," I said firmly, "all of it. By tomorrow." Jeremy scoffed. "That's not happening. The deposits are non-refundable. The wedding's in 3 days." "Then I'll go to the police," I threatened. "I'll report the fraud." My father's expression hardened. "No, you won't, because if you do, I'll make sure you regret it. Think about what this would do to our family's reputation, to my practice, to your mother's standing in the community." "You should have thought of that before you stole from me," I retorted. My brother stepped closer, his voice dropping to a hiss. "You know what your problem is, Sophie? You've never understood what family means. It's about sacrifice. It's about putting others first. But you've always been so focused on yourself, on your precious independence." The irony of his statement was so vast it almost made me laugh. Instead, I took a step back, suddenly seeing them all with perfect clarity. "Family?" I repeated. "Is that what we are? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like I've never been anything but a resource to you, someone to use when it's convenient." "Don't be so dramatic," my mother sighed. "Of course you're family." "Then give me back my money," I challenged. No one spoke. No one moved. That's what I thought. I turned to leave, but Jeremy caught my arm. "If you make a scene about this, if you try to ruin my wedding, you're done," he warned. "You were never really part of this family anyway." The words hit me like a physical blow, not because they were cruel, though they were, but because in that moment I realized they were true. I had never been part of the Bennett family, not really. I had been an accessory, a backup plan, a walking, talking safety net. I pulled my arm free and walked out of that house without looking back. In the driveway, I sat in my car for a long moment, staring at the home where I'd grown up but never belonged. Then I started the engine and drove away. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I made phone calls. First to Maya, who arrived at my apartment with pizza and a steely determination to help me fight back. Then to a lawyer, not one of my father's country club friends, but a sharp, young attorney who specialized in financial fraud. By morning, I had a plan. The next day, I went to work as usual at the investment firm where I'd been employed for the past 5 years. But instead of heading to my cubicle, I went straight to the office of Diane Winters, the CEO. 2 months earlier, Diane had approached me about a special project evaluating potential acquisition targets. I had exceeded expectations, identifying a promising organizational consulting startup that the firm subsequently acquired. As a result, Diane had hinted at a promotion, possibly even a partnership track. I knocked on her door, heart pounding but resolve firm. "Sophie," she greeted me, looking up from her computer. "What can I do for you?" "Remember that conversation we had about the entrepreneurial division?" I asked. She nodded, intrigued. "I want to run it," I said, "not just manage iTown it, as a separate entity, backed by the firm." Diane leaned back in her chair, studying me. "That's a bold ask." I know, but I also know I can make it successful. I placed a folder on her desk, my business plan, meticulously crafted over years of late nights and weekends. And I need an advance. A significant one. By the time I left Diane's office, I had a verbal agreement and a promise of funds within 48 hours. It wasn't the full amount that had been stolen from me, but it was enough to set my plan in motion. The day of Jeremy's wedding dawned clear and perfect. The kind of October day that makes New England famous: crisp air, blue skies, leaves turning brilliant shades of red and gold. I dressed carefully in a tailored charcoal suit that cost more than I would normally spend but fit me like armor. Maya met me outside the church, her expression concerned. "Are you sure about this?" I nodded. "Absolutely." We walked in together, ignoring the surprised looks from relatives who clearly hadn't expected me to show up. My parents were at the front of the church, my mother fussing with my father's boutonniere. They both froze when they saw me. "Sophie," my mother began, her voice strained. "We didn't think." "I'm not here to make a scene," I assured her coolly. "I'm here to honor a commitment." My father's eyes narrowed with suspicion, but before he could speak, the wedding coordinator was ushering everyone to their places. The ceremony was about to begin. I sat quietly in the back row as Jeremy stood at the altar, watching his bride walk down the aisle. Catherine Astley was lovely in her designer gown, her smile radiant as she joined my brother. The service was brief but elegant, with readings from Shakespeare and vows that sounded suspiciously like they'd been written by a professional speechwriter. At the reception, held at the prestigious Hamilton Hall, no doubt paid for with my stolen inheritance, I kept to myself, nursing a single glass of champagne and watching the celebration unfold around me. The flowers alone must have cost a fortune, cascading arrangements of white orchids and roses that transformed the historic venue into something out of a fairy tale. Maya stuck close to my side, occasionally squeezing my hand in silent support. We were seated at a table far from the main action, with distant cousins and colleagues from Jeremy's firm who looked vaguely confused about who we were. As dinner wound down and the dancing began, I excused myself and made my way to the small office adjacent to the main hall where the wedding coordinator had set up headquarters. I knocked once, then entered. "Miss Bennett," the coordinator greeted me, looking harried. "Is there something I can help you with?" I smiled pleasantly. "Actually, there is. I need to make an announcement." Her professionally pleasant expression faltered. "I'm afraid any announcements need to be cleared with the bride and groom first." "Of course," I agreed, "but I think you'll want to make an exception in this case." I handed her an envelope. "Inside, you'll find proof that the final payment for this venue and several of your vendors was made fraudulently, using funds stolen from me." Her face paled as she skimmed the documents. "Miss Bennett, I don't understand what you expect me to." "I don't expect you to do anything," I assured her. "The venue has been paid. The wedding is happening. But in about 20 minutes, representatives from Winters Financial Group will be arriving to make an announcement of their own." On cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Diane. "We're outside." I left the bewildered coordinator and returned to the reception, where Jeremy and Catherine were sharing their first dance. My brother looked smugly happy, spinning his bride around the floor while guests watched adoringly. I caught my father's eye across the room. He was standing with a group of men who I recognized as partners from his firm, all of them laughing and clapping as the dance ended. His smile faltered when he saw me, replaced by a warning glare. I raised my champagne glass slightly in his direction, then turned away. Right on schedule, Diane entered the hall, flanked by 2 members of her executive team and a photographer. Heads turned as they made their way through the crowd, their presence commanding attention even at this celebration of wealth and status. The band finished their song, and the lead singer stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, I've just been informed that we have a special announcement. Please welcome Diane Winters, CEO of Winters Financial Group." Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd as Diane took the microphone, her smile professional and warm. "Thank you all for allowing me to interrupt this beautiful celebration. I promise to be brief." She gestured toward me. "I'm here tonight to announce that Winters Financial Group is launching a new division specializing in organizational efficiency consulting for high net worth individuals and family offices. And I'm delighted to introduce the founder and CEO of this new venture, Sophie Bennett. Shock registered on my parents' faces as Diane continued, detailing the impressive funding and client roster of my new company, a company that would be direct competition for the Astley's family business. Catherine's father, Edward Astley, pushed through the crowd to stand near Jeremy, his expression thunderous. I caught snippets of their heated conversation. "Thought you said your sister was a nobody," and "direct competitor to our family interests." When Diane finished, she handed me the microphone. Every eye in the room was on me, including my brothers, which now burned with fury. "Thank you, Diane," I said calmly. "I couldn't have done this without your belief in me. And without my grandmother Eleanor, who always told me to save for a rainy day." I paused, letting the words sink in. "To Jeremy and Catherine, congratulations. May your partnership be more honest than the one I shared with my family." I handed back the microphone and walked through the stunned silence toward the exit. Maya fell into step beside me, trying and failing to suppress a smile. Behind us, chaos erupted. I heard my father's voice rising above the commotion, trying to do damage control. I heard Catherine demanding answers from Jeremy. I heard my mother's distinctive wail. But I didn't look back. Not even once. Outside, the October air was cool against my skin. I took a deep breath, then another. "So," Maya said, bumping her shoulder against mine, "that happened." I laughed, the sound surprising me with its lightness. "Yes, it did." "What now?" she asked. I looked up at the stars appearing in the darkening sky. "Now we build something honest. Something that's truly mine." 2 weeks later, I was working late in my new office, a modest but bright space in a converted warehouse downtown. The furniture was simple, functional. Nothing like the ostentatious trappings of my father's study or the overwrought elegance of Jeremy's wedding. My phone rang me mother's number. I'd been screening her calls since the wedding, not yet ready to hear whatever justifications she might offer. But tonight, something made me answer. "Sophie?" Her voice was small, uncertain. "Please don't hang up." I said nothing, just waited. "Your father and Jeremy are, well, they're very angry with you." She paused. "The Astleys are reconsidering the merger with your father's firm. They say having a direct competitor in the family is a conflict of interest." "That's not my problem," I replied evenly. "No," she agreed, surprising me. "It's not." Another pause. "I found your grandmother's letter, the one she left with the inheritance. I never read it before." My heart skipped a beat. I'd thought that letter lost forever, taken along with the money. "She was very proud of you," my mother continued, her voice catching. "She said you were the only one of us who understood the value of building something rather than just spending." I closed my eyes against a sudden rush of tears. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I was wrong," she admitted. "We all were. And I miss my daughter." The words hung between us, fragile and tentative. "I'm still figuring out what family means to me," I told her honestly, "and I don't know if I can ever trust any of you again." "I understand," she said quietly. "But when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here." After we hung up, I sat for a long time looking out the window at the city lights. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Drinks? The whole team is celebrating our first big client." I smiled and replied, "On my way." As I gathered my things, my eye caught on a small photograph I'd placed on my desk, me and my grandmother on her 85th birthday, our heads close together, both of us laughing. She had known all along what it had taken me years to discover, that true worth isn't measured by what others take from you, but by what you choose to build for yourself. I touched the frame lightly, whispering a thank you to her memory, then headed out into the night, toward people who valued me for exactly who I was. Toward the family I was building for myself, one honest connection at a time.